Well, hello there, friends. How are you doing today? I hope you're doing very well. Here, let's do a little wave. Yeah, yeah, there you go. We get a nice little wave. Let's do a little. That was her bowing, apparently. Wait, let's just look at that one more time. Okay, there you go. That's what a bow looks like. You hold the hammer out. That is the bow. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about the cult of Sigmar in Warhammer Fantasy, and I thought it would be nice if I had a lady warrior priest to play while we talked a little bit about that. And I named this warrior priest after Rabia Basri, or sometimes Rabia Barzura. I think sometimes she's called Hazrat Rabia Basri. There's like a couple of different names, but she's basically a female Sufi saint, a Sufi mystic, and I think she's pretty interesting. So I decided to name my character after her. Why not? And I was glancing over the Wikipedia and glancing at a couple other things to see if there was anything that was like mentioned about this character that or this the lady who I'm naming this character after. And there was this on the Wikipedia page, and I just liked it. Um, Apparently, she prayed this because she wanted to love God for pure, unconditional love. So I kind of like this line here. It's "O Lord, if I worship you because of fear of hell, then burn me in hell. If I worship you because I desire paradise, then exclude me from paradise. But if I worship you for yourself alone, then deny me not your eternal beauty." And I thought that was pretty nice. I thought that was pretty nice. Just here, you get a little sip of water out of your big mug. It's a very large mug to carry on your person at all times. But yeah, so and I did have a warrior priest, but it was I hadn't played him in a while and decided it would be better to just make a new lady. I like playing female characters, so that's something I'll get into at a different time. It's just a little bit of fun. But yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the cult of Sigmar within Warhammer and why I personally thought it's kind of an interesting thing. I recently got in the mail a book called Tome of Salvation, and this is from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Second Edition. And I was doing some research on this the way the Cult of Sigmar is kind of presented in Warhammer Fantasy and like some of the different things that kind of marks them out as kind of interesting because we do have people tend to remember the element of now I'm praying so hard, but dude, that was really hard prayers. But like we do tend to have certain elements that a lot of people know, like there's the fanaticism and there's also the whole righteous element of it, like witch hunters and things like that. But there is more to the cult of Sigmar than that, and I thought it would be a little bit fun to talk about that. And I'm also going to mention PancreasNoWork. That's a YouTube channel. He just did a video on Sigmar in terms of his time as a mortal and his time when he became a god. And I thought it would be kind of an interesting pair with that video if you wanted to watch both. That video is pretty good, and it just gives you like an overview of like what Sigmar was like and like the history of him, and then like we get a little bit into Age of Sigmar and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool, and I'm gonna put that down in the description below. But I did want to get into and talk a little bit just about the cult of Sigmar, just because I think it's pretty interesting. But basically, the original idea of how the cult of Sigmar starts. Well, Sigmar is he's the founder of the empire, Sigmar Unberogen. He's a big, cool barbarian man going through the barbarian lands, smacking things with hammers, you know, making quite a clamor, punching bad people, making the chaos gods poopy themselves because they go, "Oh no, Sigmar, what are you doing?" And then he smacks them. And I think that's pretty cool. Me personally, I think that's pretty cool. He also beat up Nagash, so if you're into someone beating up Nagash, there's that. Um, but the cult starts when later on some guy basically has a vision of Ulrich, and Ulrich is another god of the Empire. He was he is the god of like winter and wolves and war, and he's very popular in the northern parts of the empire. But basically, the whole idea was that this guy had a vision where he saw Sigmar getting basically godhood. So that's kind of neat. And throughout history, there's been times when like the various different cults have kind of battled within the empire itself. But that is the main thing here, is that Sigmar is this god of the empire, and he's very popular among the people of the empire, and nobles started to worship him, and it became basically a whole big thing. And now they have a very strong influence in political life. Basically, for the elector counts, the Church of Sigmar, the Temple of Sigmar, gets two elector count votes, so they're pretty important in determining who's going to be the next emperor. And by and large, most people in the empire worship Sigmar. Sigmar is not the only one that's worshipped, but he is by and large probably the one that is the most important to your average citizens through large portions of the empire. And something I do find interesting is that we see within the empire, people often don't just worship one god. It's kind of more like a old-fashioned traditional polytheism that you'd have, for instance, in Rome and things like that. Like, you might have a favored god or a god that you pray to more often than others, but you would probably offer your prayers to various other gods. Like, yeah, you pray to Sigmar for the most part, but maybe if you're going to a funeral or something like that, you might pray to Mor, who's like the god of the dead, and there's all kinds of different things going on there. Some worshippers of Sigmar are very much like monotheists in the sense of, or henotheists is a more accurate term, where they don't, it's not that they don't believe in other gods, but they are more focused on Sigmar himself, and they most of their time worshiping Sigmar himself. And we have a couple of different things that I find very interesting about the cult of Sigmar. In terms of it has certain flavors of Catholicism. I mean, if you've seen like the churches and the temples of Sigmar, they are very much kind of built with this sort of kind of old um, Christian, like medieval vibes and things like that. And I mean, of course, if you want to talk about like the Empire obviously has a lot of Holy Roman Empire influence and things like that, and it's pretty interesting the way all that kind of mixes together. And here's a lady who worships Sigmar, and she's bald because she shaves her head. Some people do that for faith reasons. Here, we'll talk to Victor real quick, and then we're gonna read just a little bit out of the book here. And some of this is stuff I find kind of interesting. So, in broad terms, the Cult of Sigmar has a certain number of strictures that they expect you to hold to. Obey your orders, aid dwarf folk. So this is very interesting to me. So the Cult of Sigmar has a... There are certain people among it who are kind of like almost like dwarf worshippers. In one of the dwarven novels, Grudge Bearer, it's actually kind of funny. The king of Zufar mentions that he's kind of worried about going to a certain place in the empire because he's heard about like dwarf worshippers. But the people who worship Sigmar, uh, they tend to look on dwarves very highly because dwarves gave Sigmar his iconic hammer. They gave a replica hammer later on, and they've always been very helpful to the Empire. They were the ones that taught the Umberogan, the tribes of Sigmar, how to make iron, and then they gave them weapons, and it's a whole thing. But yeah, so one of the strictures is to aid dwarf folk. So dwarves are looked upon very highly by the cult of Sigmar. And the thing that's kind of interesting is this takes on various different forms, whether you're talking about like people in the street versus like like someone like an archlector, and like the various different ways they might interpret the whole idea of venerating and helping the dwarf folk and things like that. But like, there's some people within the empire who do like actually basically worship dwarves, and it's kind of interesting. But like, that's not really the kind of tact you would see among like archlectors or like more educated members of the empire. They would want to help dwarves where they could, like help them defend against enemies and things like that. Work to promote the unity of the empire even at the cost of individual liberty. This is interesting as well because Sigmar is not just a god, he is the founder of the empire. So all of this is in some sense, the inheritance of the people of Sigmar, and it is all inherited from Sigmar in a way. Now, obviously, not every single thing that happens within the empire is like that. I like, roaring at weird plagued farmers. That's probably not really the thing. But they're the empire itself owes its existence to Sigmar. And something I do like, and this is pointed out in various videos on Sigmar, Sigmar did not just rule with an iron fist. He didn't just smash people and get them to come to his side. He negotiated with some of them. He was good at diplomacy and things like that, which is a part of the reason why I think Karl Franz is a very good example of a worshiper of Sigmar. He's a very good example of, what it means to bear the Sigmarite code. Bear true allegiance to His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor. Now, there's something that's kind of interesting about this too, though. If you look at those last two, and particularly at the cost of promoting unity at the cost of individual liberty, and true allegiance to His Imperial Majesty, this is obviously also a religion that can very easily be used as a tool of oppression and a tool of, not necessarily that the empire has to be bad, but like a tool to control people and things like that. Now, something that is also kind of interesting is, depending on who you talk to, obviously this takes on a little bit of a different meaning, because some people within the empire and among the cult of Sigmar interpret this as you have to listen to imperial authority, you have to follow them. Some of them kind of fudge it and kind of say things like, because this is also what the cult teaches itself, like what the higher cult teaches, and there's all kinds of like little individual sects and little things that are kind of different, and different parts of the cult and different parts of the temple of Sigmar itself kind of look at this in different ways. But those are both kind of a thing that make it very obvious that this would be a good state religion. But at the same time, the thing that's interesting is that although Sigmar worship is fairly dominant in large portions of the empire, it hasn't taken over the empire completely, in the sense that, yeah, there's probably Sigmar temples most places in the empire, or at least there's one that you could get to pretty easily, but not necessarily like in the northern part. Ulrich is still the lead, so it's kind of interesting to think about that, because this also goes back to the whole idea of like Sigmar is ultimately the founder of the empire. So like loyalty to the empire and loyalty to Sigmar are kind of like certain parts of the cult basically consider those two things the exact same thing. But I think there's also a bit more leeway there than some people would act. Like, oh, and the last stricture listed here is root out and destroy greenskins, the servants of chaos, and those who use corrupt magic, whatever they may hide. Something that's also very interesting about this is his corrupt magic. If you read about the life of Sigmar himself, it's pretty obvious that he wasn't too terribly opposed to like magic in general, but he wasn't a fan of evil sorcerers. But I mean, who is exactly? Well, I mean, I guess actually it could be kind of fun to be an evil sorcerer, but you know what I mean. Something that's also listed here is mental fortitude and defensive tactics are paramount importance to Sigmarites, who view open assault or loose thinking as open gates for corruption and heresy. However, nothing is more important than defending the empire Sigmar created, and they are willing to go to almost any length, even open blind assault, to ensure this. The cult also prizes strength and strong leadership, qualities they associate with Sigmar himself. They use these traits to promote the same strength amongst the folk of the Empire and strike at the heart of heresy, the influence of the dark gods wherever it may lie. Um, some parts of the Cult of Sigmar are also just kind of, you get a little bit of that Warhammer 40k flavor where they're a little bit worried about like, oh, you're gonna step off into heresy and you're gonna cause a problem. But it kind of seems like it depends who you're reading and who's writing it, and obviously it also depends a little bit on the individual temple. Um, Although every temple has its own traditions for initiating new members into the cult, the general process varies little. First, the novitiates, the Sigmarite term for initiates, is accepted into an order by a priest, an event that is often marked with ritual shaving. Next, they are taught the ways of Sigmar. Finally, when the training is completed, the novitiate is tested by a ranking member of the church. Most temples only accept novitiates when young, but theoretically, anyone called a Sigmar, regardless of age, can join the cult. Those temples that practice ritual shaving have many different traditions, but hammer or comet shaped tonsures are common. Novitiates rarely have any free time between the daily prayers and degrading chores they perform. What little they do have is often spent in contemplation of sacred texts. This is all talking about like what the priests themselves go through. And it's kind of interesting because there is basically a larger temple of Sigmar. Like we have the arch lectors and things like that, but you can kind of see that between provinces and individual like parts of the temple, people take on slightly different practices and things like that. And it's interesting because there's not actually one unified temple. There's basically a bunch of smaller temples that are unified in their belief in Sigmar, and the priesthood themselves tend to kind of do similar things, and you can tend to find that they'll probably I mean they mostly believe the same things, but temples kind of take on different I guess emphasis might be the word I might use here. Like, for instance, like my idea was that maybe this is a character who, like this character here, I like the idea of her being from a smaller temple where they're like also kind of into the whole idea of like, part of the way to defeat chaos is to learn and use knowledge and engineering and things like that to defeat the enemy and not just be like screaming fanatics. But you can kind of take your own flavor. And here's something I find very interesting in the section where it talks about cultists themselves. No two cultists of Sigmar are the same. The varying orders, individual temples, and widely divergent local traditions demands Sigmar's representative wear a broad array of different ceremonial outfits and cultivate some truly bizarre hairstyles. I like the idea of just being having to have a bizarre hairstyle. Let's see here. Oh yeah, this one I find interesting. The Order of the Silver Hammer's warrior priests are almost always found wearing yellow, detailed black robes over protective leathers, sacred breastplates emblazoned with griffins, comets, or crosses, and wide, high-neck gorgets are often preferred choices for armor, but cheaper chainmail is often worn in their stead. Hair is commonly shaved when the novitiate is elevated to the order, although some priests allow patches to grow back where they carefully shave holy symbols or solemn liturgies. I want you to imagine, because I always find this image funny. I want you to imagine that you've joined the Order of Sigmar and you want to let your hair grow back, but you don't want to seem like you're not being faithful. So what you got to do is you gotta you gotta carve a liturgy, a litany, like into your like, well, or like shave it into your head so that you still have the hair, but now there's like people can, oh, I can read off your head. It's like, hey man, my throat's sore, so instead of preaching today, here, just read my head. I really like that. I just find that very amusing. I don't want to taste Northern Steel. I bet it tastes like Dookie. Ah, take that. I've insulted your Dookie taste. What does that even mean? But yeah. It's so it is very interesting to kind of think about that, because I think we tend to think of like the orders of Sigmar as all being very similar, but actually there's quite a bit of difference here. And something I also find interesting here is it mentions, this is in the structure section where it mentions um, the Grand Theogonist and rules the immensely complex hierarchy of the cult of Sigmar. His is a stupendously powerful position. Not only does the Grand Theogonist have absolute authority over the largest, most powerful cult in the Empire, appointing the leaders of all major orders, he also has a great deal of secular influence. So it's kind of interesting because basically, and this is true of real world religions too, where if you ever read about like the Catholic Church and for instance the Holy Roman Empire, at one point they owned, like, I can't remember where it was. I want to say it was somewhere in France or Italy. Might have been Italy. And this was later in the Papal States too, I think. But there were like certain bishops who basically were bishops, but they were also like nobility. They were also like members of like the royal houses and stuff like that, and they kind of had to be because they ended up becoming both secular leaders and religious leaders, and that's kind of interesting. But it also, I think, that invites corruption, which is something we have to be careful about. And here's another thing that's interesting. The Order of the Torch runs almost all of the temples and shrines dotted across the empire. Most temples have a high priest who is appointed by a local lector or high capitular. Capitular? I've never heard that term before. The high priest is responsible for all Sigmarite worship in the local area and appoints the priests that attend local temples and ensures the upkeep of important shrines. In comparison to this broad ranging influence, the warriors of the Order of the Silver Hammer have no temples they can call their own. Their few buildings are usually attached to the temples and chapter houses of other orders. This is because the few high priests of the order are itinerant as priests, wandering from place to place as they see fit, directing the local representatives of the order to whatever they are needed. They are the broadest ranging of Sigmarite orders and often found under the command of the Order of the Torches Theogonists. And I find all of this very interesting because there's clearly a lot of thought put into here, because you could just have like a fictional temple or church or something like that, and just have them be basically just Catholic. But this is there's a lot of different people within the temple and the church that who all have very different views and things like that. And we also have sects here. It's no surprise that the immense cult of Sigmar is rife with divisions of all kinds. Most are small and simply the result of debates between the faithful, but some are fundamental and at large. Factions that form around these divisions can form powerful blocks within the cult. The following are a tiny example of the greater divides in the cult. For instance, there are people who are like ascetics. There's people who are like all about hunting demons and like witch hunters and things like that. It's kind of interesting. And here's one that I find interesting, particularly though, is the Unifiers. The Unifiers are a potentially explosive sect that believe Ulrich did not crown Sigmar as a god, but crowned him as the divine emperor, as god of all gods. They tirelessly work towards promoting the Sigmarite cult to its true position of supremacy over all others. Indeed, some extremists of the sect believe the cult of Sigmar should not just rule over other cults, but should replace them entirely. The followers of Sigmar, the Divine Emperor, have infiltrated almost all levels of the cult. The whispers circulate that at least 2 electors on the High Capitular are in an entire order of Templars, and maybe the old Grand Theognis Esmer are secret members. Whatever the truth, it is certain that many fanatical individuals of the Sigmarite cult secretly believe that the only god the Empire needs is Sigmar, and that worshipping other deities is simply a mistake. Uh, Obviously, as a cat of synchronicity that I am, I would never belong to that order. I like the idea that you can kind of worship whatever deities you want, and that there's I'm kind of the opinion that you should hold to maybe like a pantheon in a sort of way. Although, of course, with depending on how you interpret things like Age of Sigmar, I guess there's kind of one deity survives. Although, in a sense, some of the other smaller deities could have also survived in the Age of Sigmar in a different way. It's kind of interesting to think about. But I personally am not a big fan of the whole idea of the people who believe in Sigmar's divine emperorship. Although the thing that's interesting about that is if you think about most of the representations we see of members of the Sigmarite religion, I think they'd probably fall under this, because Saltspire certainly seems to think that Sigmar is the only deity you really need to worship. Um, you certainly get, depending on where you're looking at it, a lot of fanatical priests. And I think this is like the most fanatical order. There's also this, the Sisters of Faith and Chastity. And these are ladies who basically, they're kind of like nuns, but they have sisters wear black embroidered cloaks and ancient engraved plate armor, all decorated with sharp thorns to ward off the advances of the unrighteous. As the order relies on charity for its survival, its young novitiates gather donations from the gathered crowds who turn up to watch the spectacle. Because the matriarch leads the sweaty pageant, repeatedly intoning the dirge of brutal truth as she suspiciously eyes onlookers. Basically, these ladies are just wandering around judging you and going like, "You're all not worthy," which is kind of fun. Um, would let's see here. The temples, when we're talking a little bit about just the temples to Sigmar, are as varied as the folk that worship within them. Local traditions, benefactors' whim, and the desires of the priests themselves all have contributed towards the construction of some truly unique buildings. The only thing temples of Sigmar share is lack of seating for the congregation and prominent displays of stylized warhammers and comets. Some other common features include aligning the temple to the site of Sigmar's ascension, although the exact position is hotly debated, a bell tower to summon worshippers to the throng, a 12-sided asp chancel. Cancel? I don't know what that is actually. Actually, I think I know what that is, maybe. I don't know. Representing the original tribes that formed the empire. A hammer-shaped layout, an empty throne ready for Sigmar's turn, and great painted frescoes or stained glass windows depicting the great deeds of the man god and his holiest followers. Something that's kind of interesting here is that it mentions the shape of the temple itself is supposed to be similar to that of a hammer. And something that's actually kind of cool is if you look at a lot of old European churches and a lot of old Catholic churches and Orthodox churches and things like that, you'll see that a lot of the churches are actually built in the shape of a cross. And that's I find that kind of interesting. That's an interesting detail to add there. But yeah, so I mean, the image we get of the members of the Temple of Sigmar are quite interesting here, because we get a much wider image than you probably would have thought the members of the Church of Sigmar would be, like, depending on like the depictions you've seen. So you can have all kinds of different like representations within the church, and you can all kinds of different beliefs within the church. And I think that or the temple, I should say. I keep saying church, but I think I've heard on several occasions I've heard it referred to as Sigmar's church within lore official stuff, as well as the temple. Although the book here I'm using mostly says temple. So I find that very interesting, and I think that the cult of Sigmar, we often kind of depict it as just like the crazy people going, "Oh, you need to worship Sigmar or I'll bend your balls off, mate." You know, something like that, because they all sound like that, as you know. Um, and I think just from the little idea we get here, that they're much more unique than that, and they have a much grander section of like diverse worship and diverse beliefs, and they can hold their hammers in a lot of interesting ways. So I just think that's all very fascinating and very cool. And maybe you guys think that's cool too. I hope you enjoy this little investigation into the cults of Sigmar and some of the interesting practices they have. And I hope you all had a fun time listening to me. And hopefully, I can do some more of these in the future, because there's several different cults in the Warhammer Empire, the Fantasy Empire, that I find very interesting. I I think that there's also mention, of course, of witch hunters. Witch hunters are very important because, they got to go around and try to. They have that whole thing about rooting out the serpents of chaos, and that's an understandable part of their lives and things like that. Um, and I might do a whole separate video just talking a little bit about witch hunters and uh, whether or not I think they're necessary for the Empire and what kind of a job they do. Anyway, I hope you all have a great day, and I hope you all enjoyed learning about Sigmar. And I hope that I entertained you. So Sigmar bless you, Jesus bless you, Kali bless you, whomever really, everybody bless you. And let's all have hugs together, and then smash the heretics. And by heretics, I mean the bad chaos guys, not just the people who disagree with us. This isn't 40K. This is Okay, bye. Have a great one.